On the evening of June 28, 1997, an 83-year-old woman named Leila Howard turned up the radio in the living room of her small home in Texas, and then she took a seat next to her husband, Raymond, on the couch. Raymond was now 88 years old. He was also recovering from brain surgery, and they both were planning to go to bed in the next few minutes because they had a big day the next day. They were going to go to the Pioneer Day Music Festival, which is an annual fiddling festival located about 15 miles away in the town of Salado, Texas. The next morning, Leila and Raymond walked out the front door of their house, and they walked down to their driveway where their Oldsmobile car was parked and began driving. That evening, Leila's son, Hal, decided to swing by Leila and Raymond's house. He noticed that Leila and Raymond's car was not in the driveway. And so he thought, maybe his mom and Raymond were out driving around somewhere and they'd be back later. A few hours later, at 8 p.m., Hal drove back to Leila and Raymond's house. He saw their car was still not back yet. He opened up the door and he walked inside. All he could find was on one of the beds, there were all these neat stacks of clothes that were laid out, and so it just seemed like something's off here. Hal ran outside and he called the police. The police quickly discovered that Leila and Raymond had never even made it to the music festival, and nobody reported seeing anything or hearing anything. That is, until 3 days later, located 500 miles away, a police officer in a little town in Arkansas spotted an Oldsmobile that was driving with its lights off. And so the officer pulled the car over and he ran the license plate, and it came back as belonging to Leila and Raymond. He had not received any updates about this missing couple. And the officer would say to Leila, "Hey, you're driving with your lights off." And Leila would say, "Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry." And so he just flicked her lights on and said, "I'm going to give you a warning, but be careful with your lights." The police officer in Arkansas who pulled them over would eventually put it together who he had pulled over. And at that point, Arkansas would get in on the search for Leila and Raymond. July 12th, these two young boys were walking by a small stream in a town called Hot Springs, Arkansas, when they began to smell a terrible smell. Police would come out and they would search that entire area, and they would find Leila and Raymond's Oldsmobile at the base of a 25-foot cliff, and they were both deceased. There were no skid marks on the cliff itself, which meant Leila, who was driving, never hit the brakes as she went over the cliff. Nobody knows why Leila and Raymond abruptly left their town and drove hundreds of miles into Arkansas, although their family members have speculated that it could be because Leila and Raymond had declining cognitive function. This story is what inspired a very, very famous song from the late 1990s. It's called "The Way" by Fastball. I'll sing you a line and see if you can remember this song. Where were they going without ever knowing the way? Anyone can see the road that they walk on is paved in gold. It's always summer, you'll never get cold. You'll never be hungry, you'll never be old and gray. Boom, there you go. If you know the song, now you know it's got a pretty intense backstory.